Hello and welcome back. On today's video we take a look at the Amstrad CB901. Now this is the bigger brother of the very popular Amstrad 900 radio, which had an extra facility of a PA, a Roger bleep and a channel 9 selection buttons on the front. But essentially it's the same chassis within the radio, and this is the Japanese version. There are about three different versions of this radio doing the rounds, and it is the Japanese versions, as you'll note off the nameplate at the back, that are known to be of the better quality of the sets that are available. Now I picked this radio up on eBay for about 30 quid, but you can pay as much as £100 for these radios, and I was pleased to see that on this one it came with the original power socket on the back. It unfortunately didn't come with the original microphone, but for some people they would say fortunately, because the original microphone was a pretty poor affair, and this one is certainly a lot better, even though it's seen some use in, I think, probably a vehicle. This, looking at the sort of dirt and some of the corrosion on the radio, I'm assuming this was used probably professionally in a lorry or a tractor or something like that. So anyway, it's always worth taking them apart, and I actually managed to fix that break there on the case a little bit later on. If you stay tuned in, you'll see some of the repairs that I managed to do, very basic stuff on it with a 3D printer, and also some amazing performance from this radio at the end of the video, so do hang about for that. Now normally with these microphones they just normally need a little clean and a bit of switch cleaner in the switch, but it's certainly worth taking them apart and giving them a good clean, because you can have all sorts of problems from no receive down to poor audio or low audio just simply from the microphone. So it's something that if you are into repairing CBs you should never overlook, and it's very much worth taking them apart, spending half an hour taking them apart, cleaning them out, and as I always do, throwing them in the sink and giving them a good clean. Now you can put these parts in a dishwasher, of course, and things like that if you've got that available, but I like to do things by hand and get in there with a toothbrush and get them really clean. And as you can see there, it looks pretty good. Now within the set it didn't look like anyone had been to it, other than there had been some water ingress, which is a little bit unfortunate, but we sort that out a little bit later on. So all this really needed, as you can see there, was a nice clean, and it's always worth doing that when you first get a radio apart. So anyway, looking again, I couldn't see that there was any signs of screwdrivers going in, and all of the cores within the inductors looked good, and I couldn't see any capacitors bulging or anything like that. However, there was this issue here with the case, which we will sort later on. You can see the one side has the nice shiny screws, and this one is where the corrosion has got in. Again, it's worth taking off the front fascia primarily because it's easier to service the buttons and the potentiometers when you're actually cleaning them, and also you can check for dry joints and other issues around the boards. This looked okay visually. I hadn't even powered this radio up, so I didn't know if there were any faults with it. I just thought I would give it a proper service, a good going over, as I usually do. So anyway, going through it, again it seemed in fairly tip-top shape really, and all the buttons were functioning and the potentiometers appeared to be all okay. However, there was one issue, and it's one issue that plagues these radios, is it didn't come with the power lead. They're actually impossible to get hold of, the power leads for these radios, and they very often have been swapped out. So I actually made a very rudimentary plug for it, and while that was printing we cleaned up the fascia and got all the bits out to dry, ready for a little bit of paint and touch-up, which again it's the little things, the little details which always make a repair look good. But you equally don't want this thing to look like new. I like to keep the history of the radio. I certainly try and avoid repainting cases and things like that unless they're really bad. So I gave it a little hoover out with this handy little portable battery hoover and cleaned up some of the potentiometers. Now the first thing I always do is check the onboard protection diode. This is very much worth doing because very often on radios this will either have been blown or removed or linked out, and it's important that you don't cross the polarity on these sets. So there we go, you can see my little plug, and again very important, if you're making leads please put a fuse holder and a fuse in there. So made up this little lead and it connects nice and firmly within the radio. I just used some bootlace ferrules to connect to the pins inside the socket. And the mic reassembled, a little bit of light grease on there. Like I said, that's the repair I did for the mic. It was simply a little collar to fix that to the back of the case, now clamps nice and tight on the screw. So the next job, as you might have seen, it was missing a knob. So all of these smaller knobs are the same type. So I designed one and sat it on the 3D printer, and then when it popped off the printer we touched up the rest of them with some nice enamel paint. Now the cases, as you could see there, was also broken, so again onto the 3D printer, designed a little piece to fit in there, and with some glue it fit in perfectly. Now this is a good way of touching up the screws. I use this metal paints for touching up the screws. You don't have to always replace the screws if they're rusty, you can just clean them up. The resistors on these are known to very often be removed. Now you must always ensure that it's got a ballast resistor in there, and out of the on the equipment this was doing roughly 5 watts, but it was slightly off frequency, and I brought it up as best as I could. But first I adjusted the VCO as per the instructions in the service manual, and then I did a test on the spectrum analyzer there and found that it was slightly off frequency. It's still within spec but slightly off frequency, and you can see it moving down as I adjust the inductor there, and that's as close as I can get it. It's 17 Hertz off. The only way I could change this is to either change the crystal or put some capacitance against it. But we moved on to the receive here, and I use a step attenuator and a 30 dB attenuator in series, and a basic function generator to test the receive side of the radio. Right, well that's this bad boy all tuned up and ready to rock and roll. Like I say, I've not gone into detail on the tuning up of this because there are other videos such as UK CB radio servicing which go into super detail on the tune up to these. So, but we'll stick the lids back on this, plug the speaker back in, and then see if we can raise anyone. I don't think we will this time of the evening. And just one thing to mention, I've got some pretty decent little lights above here, but oh my god, do they make some noise on 27 meg. Yeah, the Ofcom will tell you it's radio hams that are causing all the interference. I don't think so. Okay, let's box this back up. I'm super pleased with how this has come out. It's been quite good fun, and so I'm really pleased with the repairs and the other bits that have sorted this radio out. So yeah, cracking. I cleaned up the case and painted it there, got rid of the rust to prevent any more corrosion, although it's probably going to stay in the shack, so I'm sure it'll be fine. And I used some isopropyl alcohol to clean the back of the board up, and that's come up really nice, and there are no issues there. Right, so this is it, almost finished. All I need to do is to make some legs for it so it can sit on my shelf with all the other radios. I'm really pleased how this has come out. Like I say, it cleaned up rather nicely, and it still looks like a nice vintage radio. Like I say, I try and avoid spraying them and doing too much to them. I like the radios to have a little bit of history, and because this, is a 40-year-old radio, a bit like the rest of things that are that age. They show their age, a bit like me, really. You'll have seen the other brackets that I make to fit these to the shelf, and I find these very useful. It stops the radio sliding about. So we'll get them on the printer, and while they're printing we'll switch on the radio and just see what signals we can pick up with this thing. I wonder if anybody's on.
Name is Paddy, Papa Alpha Delta Delta Yankee, and having a good day. The propagation is working well. Down there, North Wales now, I think I caught down round about Europe. Tango 88, copy, upper channel. Not too sure, Tommy's probably going to be your best man for that. Sean back in there again, London. I've lost him at French, I'm right in over the cafe on there. I heard him saying he was in London. Would you, and do you hear what I would call it? Nice to work you. You don't know. Have a good evening, dear. 7-3 from Mark. That's just mental. I'm aware before they hype. Yeah, Germany got you in there, pal. We're trying to get through everybody here, so we've got Germany in there. I think we've got a French station, and London down there. So let's put it. See if we can hear Sean in London. You still in there, buddy? I've got an station, and that's just mental. Station for the Netherlands calling there, go ahead, this is 108.
Some perfectly timed, excellent propagation and conditions there to test the receive side of this wonderful little radio. Well, I hope you've enjoyed some of the techniques that I've used to bring this radio back up to spec. I'm certainly very happy with how it's come out, and if you've liked what you've seen here, please consider subscribing. It'd be great to get a few more members on board and spread the word around. Take care, have a great weekend, we'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.